Hi guys, it's Megan and I'm here today to talk to you about a process called glycolysis. So glycolysis is the process of breaking down glucose. Well, I should title this. Where did we get the glucose from? We got the glucose from glycolysis. Where did we get the glucose from? Remember, the glucose came from the Calvin cycle, from photosynthesis. That was the whole point of photosynthesis, was to make this glucose. So now we have glycolysis occurring. And glycolysis can happen in any kind of cell because it occurs within the cytoplasm. So it doesn't matter if it's a eukaryotic, a prokaryotic, a plant, an animal, a fungi. It doesn't really matter. Every single cell on this planet makes some sort of energy through glycolysis. It just depends really on the presence of oxygen or not. If oxygen is present, that's what this is showing here, then we're going to see that glycolysis is going to split glucose down into pyruvic acid. It's going to combine with some other things with the Krebs cycle. It's going to go down another electron transport chain. It's going to make a ton of ATP. Okay? If oxygen is not present, we have something called fermentation. And there's a couple of different types of fermentation. So again, we start with glucose. Again, we end with pyruvic acid. But this time, if oxygen is not present, then pyruvic acid breaks further down into either, we look at either lactic acid or ethyl alcohol. But either way, this is happening in the cytoplasm of all living organisms. And this is glycolysis right here. Again, I'm not really concerned about some of these names over here. But what I do want you to realize is that glucose is breaking down through the production of ATP, right? So I'm using some ATP in here to do this, into something called pyruvic acid. Okay? So here I start with glucose. I'm then breaking it down to another 6-carbon compound. So each one of these stands for a carbon. In this case, it's glucose with 6 phosphates. So it's a 6-carbon compound with a phosphate attached to it. It's then breaking down again here. So it's going from glucose to fructose. I'm actually getting larger at this point. And then it's breaking down again. This time, though, I need another little ATP molecule to do that. And then it further breaks down to either DHAP or what's called GP. From there, it's really this down here that I care about. Okay, so glucose, ultimately, you don't need to know all these steps up here. All I want you to realize is that glucose is breaking down to ATP and pyruvic acid. Okay? So out of this, for every molecule of glucose I have, I get 2 ATP molecules and 2 pyruvic acid. Well, if I look back at this and I am a bacterial cell, how many things of ATP do I need? I need 2. Guess how many I made? 2. Okay? So in a bacterial cell, or something that uses fermentation to collect energy, it's a breaking down of glucose into these 2 molecules, and then these 2 molecules go back and feed the system over and over again. So it doesn't take much energy to keep the system going, but it also doesn't produce a whole lot of energy too. And that's why it only occurs in bacterial cells, because they can, and I shouldn't say that too, it occurs in your cells too, in lactic acid formation when you guys get sore muscles as well. But it's only in a cell, it's not supporting the whole organism. Okay? So that's what glycolysis is. It's just a breakdown of glucose to 2 ATP molecules and 2 pyruvic acid. The pyruvic acid, as you can see right here, whether or not it's respiration, this is with oxygen or with fermentation without oxygen. I probably should change these right here so they fit better. But so this is fermentation without oxygen or respiration with oxygen. It's going to need that pyruvic acid. Okay, so it starts with glucose right here. That glucose in this process right here is going to split it down to pyruvic acid and some ATP. If it is fermentation, that ATP goes down here and back around and keeps this cycle going, right? So it takes 2 ATP, but it makes 2 ATP, it takes 2 ATP, but it makes 2 ATP. And then if it's in the presence of oxygen, so that's really what we want here, this cellular respiration. It's going to yield a lot more ATP molecules for us, and that's really what we need as multicellular organisms to keep going. So we need that oxygen in respiration to keep going. So glycolysis is going to, again, break down glucose to pyruvic acid. Didn't change anything, but this time it's going to go into another cycle called the Krebs cycle, and from there it's going to move down into the electron transport chain, and that's really where I'm going to gain a ton of ATP. So you can see the ATPs are really big there. So here's my, starts with is glucose, ends with is 2 pyruvic acids and 2 ATP. My biogeochemical cycle, 1 glucose makes ATP and pyruvic acid. 2 pyruvic acid is either used in A, fermentation, which is without oxygen, this stuff right here, or B, the Krebs cycle with oxygen, which is combined with acetyl-CoA and then some other molecules to make something called NADP+. So that is it. Oh, and the location I told you is in the cytoplasm. So I guess I should add that. Location is in cytoplasm, which again is in every single cell. So I'm going to change this too, so that this is blue and corresponds to the blue up here, and we'll make this green so that it corresponds with the green right here. So anyways, I hope that was helpful.